Now today, we've got a really important race here to consider, and if there's one state agency that's little understood by the public, it would be the Railroad Commission of Texas. Despite its name, the agency has nothing to do with railroads anymore. Instead, it regulates the oil and gas industry. And in the interest of full disclosure, as I always try to do, the oil and gas industry is near and dear to my heart. I love it. I've worked in it. My husband still works in it. And it's very important. But the Railroad Commission regulates the oil and gas industry in the state of Texas, and it has authority over your residential gas bills. It turned over its last bit of authority over Texas railroads to the state's Transportation Commission in October of 2005. So to say that the commission has nothing to do with railroads is entirely accurate. There is a conversation being had about changing the name of the commission. Railroad commissioners are elected to 6-year terms, with one commissioner seeking election every 2 years. When a commissioner is appointed by the governor to fill an unexpired term, that appointee serves until the next general election, at which time the appointee may run for the remainder of the unexpired term. Now, there are lots of people running for the Railroad Commission. There's actually 2 of the positions are up this time. There's the position that is currently held by Barry Smitherman. He is the current chairman of the Railroad Commission. And then there's another place that Mr. Roland Sledge is here today, which is place 2. And then today we also have Greg Parker. He is a county commissioner from Comal County, I think. And so those 3 gentlemen are here today. Now, I have tried to contact Miss Elizabeth Murray Kolb, who is running for the place that Mr. Parker and Mr. Smitherman are running for, and have been unable to get in touch with her. Mr. Al Lee, who is also running for that place, was coming and then let me know this morning that he could not be here. So in the interest of trying to get all the candidates here for Railroad Commission, we're going to attempt to finish up the Railroad Commission on Friday, May the 11th. We're taking a break next week because most of those candidates couldn't be here next Friday. Next Friday will be Emergency Services District 2. The President, Mitch Henderson, has asked to speak to you on the new accountability measures. That will be next Friday. So take good notes today so that you can reconnect those dots whenever we have the rest of the Railroad Commission candidates on the 11th. Now, today we have a special guest. He has spoken to Grassroots America before. He is a local oil and gas man. His name is Harold McGowan. He is president and CEO of Navidad Resources, LLC in Tyler. And I wanted an oil and gas man to be here to ask the questions. And so Harold has been given a list of questions that I put together for the candidates. You have cards on your table. I would like for you to begin to put some questions down, kind of listen to the questions that are being asked so that maybe you don't duplicate those. And then Harold has the latitude to ask them a question that he wants to ask. Now, we're going to make an attempt to have a conversation today rather than a hard and fast 30, 60, 90-second sound bites. And I'm going to ask the candidates to help us have that conversation. So don't, as Bill O'Reilly would say, bloviate. Say what you need to say, but don't try to play run out the clock. And I know these are gentlemen here today, and they wouldn't try that because I know all those techniques. And so Harold and I will stop you if you're playing run out the clock. So now when and gentlemen, you can go ahead and make your way up here, please, to the table. And I would like for Mr. Smitherman and Mr. Parker to sit next to each other, and then Mr. Sledge on the end, since he's in a separate race. And so they are going to have 2 minutes, about 2 minutes to make opening remarks. Then we're going to ask questions, and they're going to have a conversation. And Harold is going to kind of let them rotate. And Harold, you can come on up here, and I'm going to give you this mic. And we're going to kind of rotate here and see if we can have a conversation. I know those of you who came to the state rep candidate forum enjoyed the conversation rather than the sound bites. And that's easier to do if you have any more than 3 candidates at a time, you just can't do that. So we're going to try to have a conversation now. At the end, they will have about a minute to either address an issue that wasn't addressed that they believe should have been, to redirect a question on a topic that they believe they didn't get to answer fully, or they can ask one of the other candidates a question. But if they do that, then the others have an opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal. So, I do want to recognize State Representative David Simpson, who is with us today. He is a great statesman, a great statesman. And David, we can't say that about everybody, but we absolutely, you have the Grassroots America stamp of approval, sir. Okay, now Patty, you're asking me something.
Because we were so late getting in here with the elections.
Okay, all right, that's great.
Yeah.
And Harold, if you want to get down here,
It's Kathy.
you do however it is comfortable to do. And, or we could do this to the side. All right. Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here.
Hello. I've had many years dealing with the Railroad Commission, and actually I think it's one of the best agencies in the state. Does a great job and really works with the operators and helps the operators in a lot of ways. So I'm a proponent of the Texas Railroad Commission. I need to ask a few questions that Joanne prepared. Why is the Office of Railroad Commissioner an important position in Texas in 2012? If you'd like to start on this end.
Do we need to introduce ourselves first?
Yes.
Sorry.
That's all right, that's all right. So I'm Barry Smitherman. I'm the chairman of the Railroad Commission today. I was appointed to the position last summer, and now I'm running to keep my job. In answer to your question, the Railroad Commission regulates the oil, gas, lignite coal, and pipeline industries in Texas, as well as the gas distribution businesses. The oil, gas, coal industry are the pillar of our economy. We are producing more oil and gas in Texas than we have in a long time. That means that we're creating jobs, great paying jobs. We have about 250,000 people working in the mining industry and about another 1 million that work in industries related to that. And the average oil and gas job pays a lot more than the average non-oil and gas job. So we have to do our job well so that the private sector can continue to find more oil and gas and coal and bring it to the surface, so that we can work toward being energy independent, so we don't have to buy oil and gas from crazy people in other countries that don't like us. And we have to continue to fight the EPA. This EPA is out to destroy the Texas oil and gas industry. And I've been fighting them for at least 5 years. I've sued them 7 times. And in fact, let me just announce this. Yesterday, I sent a letter to the president and the EPA administrator asking that Al Armendariz, the Region 6 administrator, be suspended without pay, and that an investigation begin immediately to determine if his bias, based upon his statements that the oil and gas industry should be crucified like the Romans used to crucify innocent citizens, we need to determine if that bias against the industry has resulted in enforcement actions in the 5 states of Region 6 that are without merit and basically are harassment of this industry. That is why this is a very important job.
My name is Greg Parker. I'm County Commissioner in Comal County. Barry's right. It is a very important job. It is because, as we know, the Obama administration has actually, of course, given out money to, using the DOE to give out money to organizations, or should I say, groups and organizations that are ridiculous. Not only does the EPA need to be reined in, but the fact is they're taking, of course, $500 million to bankruptcy court just to lose 1,400 jobs. And no one, I believe, no one in this race has fought the liberals harder than I have. I've even debated Willie Brown, authored a book on the myth of global warming. I took him to task so hard that they've actually called me an uppity Tea Party N-word. I'm just not releasing letters. I'm actually going after them. And that's what's important. We need someone to do that. It's important also because on the road, we need someone that's also going to protect private property rights. As a county commissioner, authored an order in my commission that actually says that we will not use, or we restrict the use of eminent domain under any circumstances. That's how much I want to protect private property rights. We need someone out there that wants to do that and upgrade the technology at the Railroad Commission. It's important for that. As you know, you worked with the Railroad Commission. You know the technology is not only outdated and antiquated, and it's more than just releasing a form online. It's actually changing the structure of what's down there and the infrastructure that's down there at the Railroad Commission. That's what's important, and that's why we need a new Railroad Commission.
Hi, my name is Roland Sledge, and I'm running for a different seat than Barry and Greg are running for. I'm running for Elizabeth Ames Jones's seat, which she has already vacated. We are on the threshold of the biggest oil and gas boom in the history of this country, due in large part and to Aggie George Mitchell's perfecting horizontal drilling in the late 90s. We had the tools and they were directional, but they wouldn't necessarily go in the direction you wanted them to. So we have been thrown a life jacket starting in 2000, and it's a life jacket to energy independence, and our own government is trying to shut us down. So I have 35 years experience as an oil and gas lawyer and energy executive. I've done nothing else in my career but be in this industry. I've been at the regulatory level, and for the last 27 years have been an executive with 2 different companies. But it's so important, in my opinion, that we need at least one commissioner of the 3 that has industry experience, that's been there, done that. And that's what I've done day in, day out for over 35 years.
All right, thank you. Very good response. What are the top 3 roadblocks to a coherent energy policy in the United States? So just go in order. If
we keep going in order, does that work? First, let me say hi to David Simpson, a good friend that I worked with when we were battling the TSA last session. And David and I were 2 of the only people who were willing to stand up and go toe-to-toe with TSA so they didn't grope our children and our grandmothers and people that are clearly not a threat to this country. So David, thank you for your leadership and your support of my candidacy. We're going to sound a little bit like a broken record, but the EPA is our biggest impediment. This EPA has put forward at least 24 regulations, proposed regulations, directed at the fossil fuel industry. Many of them are directed at coal, and they're basically guiding us to the point where it's going to be difficult to permit and finance a new coal plant. That's a real problem because in America we get 40% of our electricity from coal. And in Texas it's a little less, but coal is still a very important element to keeping prices low and creating jobs. The other issue is they're going after fracking now, either from the water side or from the air side, claiming that this activity, which Roland accurately described, is a groundbreaking technological innovation that allows us to recover all this great bounty of oil and gas. The Obamas want to shut it down. And by doing these so-called studies on water and air, they're designed to throw doubt in the minds of people that don't know the industry, to lead them to believe that it is harmful to groundwater. And we know that there's never been a recorded case of fracking contaminating groundwater. So we have to fight the Obama administration. You know, I commend Greg for what he's done, but I actually have sued them 7 times and we've won twice. And every time we get it in front of a judge, we win, including a 6-month stay on the cross-state air pollution rule, which basically would have shut down many of our coal-fired plants, including 2 of them here in East Texas. And it would have put at risk our ability this summer to keep the lights on. That's the kind of fight we need but we also have to educate the rest of America. There's a lot of America that doesn't understand this business. They think the electricity comes from the light switch, and that oil and gas come from the pump. But $4 gasoline is beginning to crystallize the mind of people who have not thought about this. So we have a great opportunity to be energy independent, to create great jobs, and to have once and for all the ability to not really care about what happens in the Middle East.
For me, I believe that the first impediment is Barack Obama. Period. That's the first impediment. And we need to get rid of him. The second one, I believe, and Barry mentioned, of course, the EPA, but also Fish and Wildlife. The fact is they've listed hundreds of endangered species now, or want to list more than 100 endangered species. And most of those, matter of fact, more than half are over the oil patch. And that's ridiculous. The fact is we've heard about the West Texas lizard, or I call it the Geico lizard. And the fact is, you know, listing that thing can kill 268 million barrels out of the Permian Basin. You know, Jerry Patterson said there's a reptile dysfunction in the Permian Basin. The Fish and Wildlife needs to be, and then of course, in my mind, I believe the next impediment is Agenda 21. The fact is that you've got lawmakers from both sides of the aisle pushing Agenda 21, which leads in turn to restricting energy resources. And not only do we need to educate them on that fact, but we also need to stand up against those, because you've got, not only from Agenda 21 standpoint, restricting access to oil and gas exploration, but we also restrict energy uses at your home through such things as smart meters and things to that effect. So that needs to stop.
Well, you know, being an S, this has always happened to me my entire life in school and everything. When they alphabetize, you ended up at the end of the line. So I've got to say ditto, ditto, ditto. But I'll add that it's Obama. If we get rid of him, then every agency head has to submit their resignation immediately. So if we could get rid of him, we could replace the head of the EPA and rescind some of these unnecessary and unreasonable rules. Greg is certainly right as to Fish and Wildlife. It's insane what they're doing. And there's one other outfit, the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, where although energy, and I'm not going to be able to give you the exact percentages, but you know, our reserves in this state and nation look like this right now. 12 years ago, before George Mitchell, any Aggies can whoop now, before George Mitchell perfected those tools, this is what it looked like. And in my opinion, George Mitchell ought to get the President's Medal of Freedom that were awarded yesterday to a bunch of people I'd never heard of. So it's Obama, it's all of his appointees, it's all down the line, and we are battling them daily. That the EPA has been cranking out regs 24/7 for about 2 years. And let me tell you, they are our enemy. They are the enemy of America's energy independence and our very survival. My biggest fear is that we're sitting on 100 years worth of oil and gas reserves in these shales in probably at least 15 states. The government would get off our back, we could start building new rigs, and we could get to that stuff and become energy independent in 10 or 12 years or less. But here's what I fear, is there's going to be, and it's not if, it's when something happens in the Straits of Hormuz, or the Israelis and the Iranians get into it. Then I promise you, oil will be $300 to $400 a barrel tomorrow, and our economy will be wrecked. And they think in Washington that you just turn on the spigot and it comes out. So that's my fear. Our very survival is at stake here.
Okay, thank you. What can the Railroad Commission do to better educate citizens on Texas energy?
Well, that's a great question. We need to get out and we need to talk to people. We need to travel the state. We need to have town hall meetings. We need to be available. We need to receive and respond to questions every time they come up. And we need to freshen up our website and improve our IT. And I'm glad that Greg agrees with me on that, because we are now in the process of hiring a new head of IT at the Railroad Commission. Since I came there in July, we've attempted to modernize the Railroad Commission's IT to make our website more friendly, to make more permits available for permission over the internet, to reduce the lag time, to try to do our part so that the industry can drill faster, quicker, and recover more resource. It is one of our responsibilities to get out among the people like we're doing today, and thank you again for everything that you do here and talk about these issues. Sunday, I will be on Fox News talking about Ed Almendaris and his comments about crucifying the oil companies like the Romans used to crucify. I guess he just left out the word Christians, but I assume that's what he meant by those statements. I will be saying, again, we need to suspend him and begin an investigation.
Well, I will always give credit where credit is due, but for the most part, since I kind of started in championing the fact that the website was bad and needing new technology, and having been a technology professional for several years leading large software development projects, I do applaud you getting that started after I suggested that. I think it's important, the fact that in educating, that they do get out, that they do get out of Austin. I've said that from the start of this campaign as well. Get out of Austin and actually get amongst the people, as well as also from the website. Once it's approved, you can actually offer courses to individuals online on how 101, Energy 101. I think that's important to do and necessary to do as well. I'm going to keep my comments short.
I agree with all of that, but also, let me tell you what's happening at the elementary school level. My wife's a 29-year school teacher, and our children are being brainwashed to be radical environmentalists. And there's no flip side. There's no balance in the storytelling. So this has to go to the State Board of Education. This has to make its way into the textbooks, because the other side is there. And I would venture to say that we are all conservationists. We hunt and we fish, and we don't want to ruin the water and the land and the other natural resources that we enjoy. And I know nobody in the oil business wants to do that except the guy that does it with bubble gum and baling wire and doesn't follow the regs, and we don't want him in this business. We want him screwing up some other business. So, you know, I agree with downloadable type stuff where you can take 101, and I will commend to you, although I know this audience doesn't need this. I'm in the East Texas field country, but Inga has a great little video animation called Digging Deeper. And it shows how a horizontal well is drilled and fracked. And I mean, in 5 minutes, anyone can understand what the concept is. And we need to get the word out there. You know, the industry too long has had too many people speaking for it, too many organizations, and it's just amazing that our PR has been so bad. I mean, I don't know why we didn't, when oil went up and everybody's screaming about gas prices and how much money the oil business is making, why we don't put out the chart that shows the oil business as an industry makes an 8% return on investment, rate of return. Pharmaceuticals is like 32, and they're like, 14 that are ahead of us. Now, our numbers are a lot larger because our costs are a lot larger, but the rate of return ain't all that great. And the risk is huge. So we don't tell our story at all well. And on gasoline, why weren't we out there saying, hey, it doesn't matter if it's $90 a barrel or it's $120 a barrel. Our profit margin is still the same, because the cost of the barrel is our feedstock, and that's what we have to pay for it.
Okay, I'm going to change the order up a little bit. Do you support hydraulic fracturing?
Boy, do I. I mean, I love to talk about this. I had the greatest compliment paid to me by a geophysicist about a year ago when we hired him, when we drilled into this 22,000 acres we have in the northeastern corner of Montana in the Bakken oil shale play. In fact, we're getting ready to complete a well next week up there. We've got high hopes for it. But he told another one of our geophysicists, he said, I've never met a lawyer that knew so much about horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracking. Well, I'm a mechanical guy. I'm the kid that took everything apart at home, couldn't get half of it back together. But I've always been fascinated by the mechanical side of this business. I mean, to think that we're operating through a hole this big, 2 miles, a mile or two away, and the pipe and the hole looks like this, and you're having to get and the torque and the heat and the pressure, and then you don't even find anything. I mean, just the mechanical side is absolutely fascinating. So, we fracked our first well, as you all know, in 1947. I was 2 years old. We've done more than 1 million of them. The fracking process, of course, takes place at the level of the formation. The shallowest shale formation in this country is below 4,000 feet. You cement in your surface casing. It's impossible. And the fracks only go 300 or 400 feet when you frack your 2 or 3 1 to 4 mile lateral at 400-foot increments. So, as I've jokingly said, if I were to win this seat, it would be over my dead body that they stop fracking. And although the commissioners don't sign the fracking permits, I've also said they'd have to put my fanny in jail before I told them downstairs to stop signing those permits. And you know what? I don't think Texans would leave me in a federal jail very long.
In response to your question, yes, I do. And I've been asked that on several occasions. And it's important because completing my PhD in public policy and administration and dissertation research on oil and gas exploration and its correlation to economic growth, and doing several other things in research, I've been asked that question, Greg, how, not only how's it work, but the fact is, since you researched it, you must know. And I would say that since I'm not beholden to any oil and gas company at all, but I can give them a research perspective and tell them that there's no causal relationship between hydraulic fracturing and water contamination, earthquakes, or anything to that effect. And they can trust my opinion on that. And I think that's critical, and it's important that we have someone there that can really engender the trust of the citizens as well as the respect of the industry. And I think that's important. So in answer to your question, yes, I'm for hydraulic fracturing.
Absolutely. This is the game-changing technology invented and refined by George Mitchell, who I had the pleasure of meeting yesterday, who absolutely is an American hero, no question about it. And that has allowed us to find this incredible bounty of resource. 100 years, 200 years, I'm not sure exactly how much natural gas we have, but we got a bunch of it. And the beauty of what's happening now is we're continuing to refine horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing. So the service companies are figuring how to go deeper, longer laterals, use less water, different perforation, looking at different stratas, figuring out exactly how to pinpoint the drill, how to make it go horizontal more quickly with less of a kick-out point. All of that is happening today because technology does not stand still. Americans know how to improve things. We've done it throughout our life, and we'll continue to do it here. It does not contaminate groundwater. The Range Resources case is Exhibit A that we have now proven to the EPA, and I commend the Railroad Commission for doing this, that fracking does not contaminate groundwater. The EPA swooped in 2 years ago, claimed that this was happening in Parker County, made the company quit drilling. They had to lay off some of their people. And then quietly, about 3 weeks ago, we got a letter at my office from the EPA dismissing their lawsuit against Range Resource and basically admitting that they were wrong.
Okay, thank you. Great answers. How do you balance environmental concerns with the need for oil and gas and the need for energy independence?
Well, I think it's simple. I used my laugh line a couple of questions ago about, you know, if I'm elected, I'm an industry guy. It's all I've done day in, day out for 35 years. But also, I'm a conservationist, and I don't want to ruin any of our natural resources. And so I would be a strict but fair, common sense regulator. And the regulations are necessary, and they need to evolve with the technological advances of this industry, because already they're not there. As we've started to drill horizontally, the units, of course, are different, and the regs are out of sync with it. And so, you know, everybody needs to follow the regulations. The regulations need to be up to date, and the people that consistently violate the regulations should not be able to get a P5, which is the permit to be an operator in this state. And if I'm a railroad commission, the guy that keeps doing this, making the same mistake, is not going to be an operator in this state. He can go to Arkansas or somewhere. I believe that we can protect our citizens' health and safety, the groundwater, and still produce more oil and gas than at any other time in our great state's storied petroleum history.
I think for me, first and foremost, as a Christian, of course, I want to be a good steward over my environment. That's first and foremost. But with that said, I think it is possible and necessary to maintain a balance to where we're not an environmental zealot like we see over with the Obama administration, and which in turn will lead to job loss. If we look at from the Railroad Commission, whether with surface casing moving from the TCEQ or groundwater unit moving from the TCEQ, and having those avenues within the Railroad Commission, I think that is a good step in making sure that we protect the groundwater from the surface casing, and making sure we actually are being good stewards from that standpoint. As we move forward, I think it's also important that we educate and get out and make sure we educate the citizens of the impacts of what we do from the standpoint of the environmental interest. Having authored a book on the myth of global warming and its environmental impacts, or non-impacts, I should say, on man-made global warming, it's non-impacts. I can tell you that when we look in terms of environmentals, the first thing people will tell you is, oh, environmental, then that must be CO2 or things to that effect. I mean, that's not all it's about. It's about not only protecting groundwater, but making sure things are done in a responsible manner. If I'm not mistaken, 80,000 enforcement actions or cases or complaints were done at the Railroad Commission last year, and I think 95% of those resulted in no fines or fees. We need to review those to make sure that if there are egregious, we hold those accountable. And if they're not, then we make sure that the small operator is allowed to, if it's a first offense, allowed to correct that offense and move forward. And if it's ongoing or a pattern, we need to make sure that we take action against those. I would also like to see a tiered penalty structure within the Railroad Commission, so small operators are held accountable, but they also are not, pretty much not driving out of business for making one mistake. So I think those are important things to do.
Well, actually, Greg, the statistics that you referred to about the number of cases without penalty occurred before I got there. That was a report that was discussed during the 2011 session. Since I arrived at the Railroad Commission, we've stepped up our enforcement. In fact, we're in the process of writing a rule that will clearly lay out the penalties associated with each infraction. I'm a former prosecutor with the Harris County DA's office. That's Houston. Let me tell you, I believe in punishing bad behavior. We're going to put in place clear rules and regulations for those operators that stay within the boundaries. We leave them alone to go do their business. But for bad actors, we go after them. And I'm not adverse at all to punishing someone who's behaved badly. Those statistics you referenced, those will not be the statistics continuing on my watch. But we have to understand the oil and gas industry creates jobs. Great paying jobs in America. And achieving energy independence or working toward it keeps our money at home and hopefully keeps some of our troops at home. So we don't have to send people into harm's way to go fight in a foreign country just because that dictator sits on top of a bunch of hydrocarbon. I said in a speech 2 weeks ago at the University of Houston, I care more about Texas jobs than I do about eliminating CO2.
Thank you. How about we start in the middle this time? That's fine. Keep things interesting. How do you make sure all areas of the state are well represented, even areas that don't have as much historical oil or natural gas use?
And represented in terms of the oil and...
Well, I think one way to interpret this might be, like for example, in some ways you're kind of preaching to the choir here today, but you've got people on the other side of this issue. You've got people that live in urban areas that are concerned about oil and gas activity. They don't understand what they see going on. There's a lot of misinformation put into the media. So what role could the Railroad Commission play in trying to reach out to those people and get them to understand and give them a sense of confidence that the Railroad Commission is taking care of these things so that they don't tend to run to the EPA to try to get the problem solved, the perceived problem?
No, okay, now I understand your question. I think for me, we've mentioned, all of us have mentioned, of course, in the before mentioned questions about education, and that's fine. I think, though myself having maybe a slightly youthful look, no, Barry does too, I'm just kidding, and so does Roland. But having the ability to go into those urban areas and talk to individuals myself, and being active in actually getting out there, and not only, like I mentioned before, debating Willie Brown and getting involved with those issues and letting them know that these things are safe. And I mean, we can't stretch education to these issues enough, but I think it's really important that we use the bully pulpit of the Railroad Commission to, to enlighten the citizens to the actual problem. Because I think really what the problem is when we get down to it, the Obama administration and their allies truly believe in man-made global warming. That's the bottom line. That permeates everything they do. And I think once we actually get down to that single problem and educate from that standpoint that fracking is okay, it's not going to contaminate the air or the water. I guess, you know, we've stated this 100 times. I can't change my answer, but I guess my point is to get out amongst the folks and talk with them. And being part of those individuals, I think is important. And really telling the citizens that you are the people that we represent. You said it earlier, we the people. You elected us, and we need to come back and talk to you about these issues.
Thank you. Yeah, let Barry go next.
Well, let me tell you, if you had 4 kids, you would have gray hair like Roland and I do.
I have one. Mine's silver.
I had to deal with one of mine this morning before I came over here. Education, clearly part of it, but again, I'm going to talk about job creation. Job creation in the oil and gas patch, whether it's in East Texas. By the way, if you haven't been to the Kilgore, the Oil Museum, there's a great plaque that says East Texas oil defeated Adolf Hitler. That sums it up right there. And Roland, they don't teach that to our kids in school, unfortunately. But we have an obligation to do it. Oil and gas jobs create spin-off jobs for every part of our state and flow about $3 billion a year into the state's coffers, in addition to sending money to local governments. So it benefits all of us. But I would also add, back to the enforcement issue, we have to make sure that everyone believes that the scales are balanced. That if an oil and gas company engages in inappropriate behavior, they will be brought to task. And we will do that as long as I'm the chairman. If they're obeying the rules, we leave them alone. We can't ever have a situation where the average citizen who is not employed in the industry or not getting a royalty check, or not believing that their life is impacted, begin to think that the deck is stacked against them.
Well, I agree with all of that, but we need to make people aware, it's said in sort of a different way than both of these gentlemen have said it, that everybody in this state, no, everybody in this country is in the oil business. You depend on things every single day that are a direct result of the oil business. Every plastic thing you touch, of course the fuel, but everything, the fertilizer you use, so many of the chemicals, the feedstock is natural gas, on and on and on. So it's an education thing, and it's a job creating thing. It's, you know, we can't find enough people in Montana to work, enough qualified people. And, you know, we need to set up our junior colleges quickly to teach low-level oil field skills. And, you know, you could go down to the Eagle Ford right now, and I was told by a welder in Corpus that his buddies and he are making $125 an hour. Now, they're very highly skilled welders. And truck drivers driving the frac trucks, the sand trucks, the trucks that have the mud pumps and so forth are making anywhere from $60,000 to $75,000 an hour. And they can't find a year.
I want one.
It's good, but not that good. This group listens, don't they? But the problem is they can't. I was so hurried to get to the tagline here that they can't find enough people that can pass the drug test. Is the problem in the Eagle Ford. And so they are hungry, and they're coming to San Antonio and raiding the UPS fleets and other fleet vehicle type truckers. And so, you know, that's what we need to do. We have to educate, and I think you all said it better than I did.
Okay. We'll start in the middle again. Do you believe there is a need to clarify the legal definition of common carrier as it applies to both oil and gas production lines?
Yes, definitely. I will tell you, while I did testify, and it's common knowledge, testified in favor of the Keystone XL pipeline in front of the State Department. The fact is, with the Railroad Commission, there's a checkbox on the form that says, okay, I'm a common carrier and I'm working in the good or the interest of the people. And in my opinion, I've said this in other forums, that government should not abdicate its responsibility of eminent domain to a third party. It should not. Whether it's a pipeline company, it should not. It should retain that authority, and I think it's important that the legislature take that up and clarify the definition of a common carrier as well, and get that straight, because I think citizens have been impacted by the takings of their land, or whether they're paid or not. There's a lot of issues out there going on about that, and citizens are concerned about that. So I think it's important. And again, I mentioned that on Commissioner's Court, we passed an order that we would not, even our government agency would not use eminent domain, and restricted the use of it severely. So I think, for me, that question is definitely a yes. And the Railroad Commission, while now they just say check the box, and now the citizen has to go fight in court to get everything straightened out. They got to go fight in court. The Railroad Commission, I believe, should take an active role in stopping that and making sure, if in the interim, saying, okay, are you a common carrier? While it's just a checkbox, we don't have to give it to them. We can say, okay, are you really a common carrier? So I think it's important that we look at that from those three standpoints. Are we going this way? I'm just kidding.
A little bit of a clarification. The Supreme Court case is still in motion for rehearing stage, so it's difficult to talk about the Denbury case. But the principles apply across the board. And what Greg is referring to in terms of checking the box, again, this was something that was in place before I got there last July. We are waiting for the Supreme Court to finish their work on the Denbury case. And in that case, They criticized the Railroad Commission because we had a form that you checked to say that you're a common carrier. Now, in fairness, behind that form, if you lie to us and you say you're a common carrier and you're unwilling to take someone else's product in your pipe, then we go after you. We can take away your common carrier status, we can fine you, we can basically put you out of business. So to some degree, saying it was just a checkbox is a little bit misleading. However, as soon as the Supreme Court gets through telling us what they find acceptable, I plan to open up a rulemaking at the Railroad Commission to clearly define what the responsibility is of the pipeline company. And they have to prove to us that they are going to carry other people's product. And that's the requirement to be a common carrier. Greg talked a little bit about what they did in Commissioner's Court back in 2005. I think to clarify, Greg, you all said you wouldn't use eminent domain for economic development purposes. This came out of the Kelo decision in Connecticut in 2005. I actually worked with then Senator Kyle Janik in drafting Senate Bill 7, which the Senate passed a week before you all passed your resolution. And that says that the state of Texas will not use eminent domain for economic development purposes. And I was pleased to work with Senator Janik on that bill and get it passed, and that is the law today.
The love of personal property rights runs deep in this state. And what Denbury did, and isn't finished yet, although Justice Willett has reheard it at the appeals court level. Denbury is an oil and gas company from Dallas, and they had CO2 over in Louisiana, wells that were producing nothing but CO2, and they owned all of them. And they built a pipeline, and they checked the box that they were a common carrier. And they brought, or had wanting to bring the CO2 to some of their wells in East Texas. And so a lawsuit was filed, and so that's where we are today, that the appeals court basically said that, you know, if you don't carry other people's products or allow other people to get it into your line, then you're not a common carrier. And so also the legislative session that was just over, I think personal property rights made some real advances. Senate Bill 18, which was signed off on by the Farm Bureau, which has 447,000 members in this state, and the pipeline industry, basically set up a way that the landowner is not run over anymore or threatened anymore. And sort of very briefly, the way it works is if you are a common carrier, if you're not a common carrier, I mean, you can buy an easement. It just may cost you more. Or someone may say, you know, over my dead body, you know, you could go around me. Well, probably at some price you can get around me. Okay, so that's doesn't stop the pipelines. It just might make it more expensive. But what in the eminent domain situation, where it is a true common carrier, then there's a procedure where you have to go get a third-party appraisal of the value of that easement. And if the easement crosses your ingress or egress to your property, that as a damage also gets to be calculated into this price. And then that is delivered to the landowner as the first offer. And then and only then, if you can't come to terms by negotiating off of that number, then they can go to court and you can have a hearing on eminent domain. So the Farm Bureau is satisfied at the moment with it. The pipelines are satisfied for a moment. I'm certain that neither group got what they wanted. So let's let this law take root and grow here for a couple of years and see how it works. And you know, then it may need to be tweaked. But, you know, let's give it a chance. At the moment, everybody is begrudgingly has signed off on it.
All right, thank you. Very good. Actually, I've just learned something new right there. Didn't even know about that problem. So,
That's the landowner Bill of Rights. Yeah, right.
so what is the #1 energy issue facing Texas, both the short and long term? And let's start with Barry this time.
Well, what we need to do in Texas and in America is use more natural gas to drive our vehicles. We have an abundance of natural gas, and if we can begin to convert pickup trucks and cars to natural gas, the price will come down for you to move around your county and city and state dramatically. My understanding is the price equivalency per gallon, if you're using natural gas, is about $1.50. So rather than paying $4, which I saw on the station right down the street, it's $1.50. The conversion cost, if you're going to convert your F-150 or my Suburban over to natural gas, is still a little expensive. But the factories, GM and Chrysler, are going to start producing vehicles that will run on both fuels. So you have a full factory warranty, and we can use all this natural gas. The other challenges we have is that we have to have enough power generation in the state to keep the lights on and keep electricity prices low. I'm proud that as a former chairman of the Public Utility Commission, we stuck to our plan, which has resulted in the lowest electricity prices in this state in 10 years. However, we are at risk because of the EPA threatening to close down some of our coal plants of having enough power next summer and the summer after that. We've got to start using more natural gas to make electricity. We have so much natural gas. Rather than using coal, as much coal, I'm not talking about doing anything with our existing fleet, but every new power plant we build in the future should be powered by natural gas. We've got the natural gas to do it. It'll keep the lights on, and it'll do it at reasonable prices. So those two objectives, I think, are worthy.
I'm going to slightly disagree with Barry. I think it's important that as a regulatory agency, we stay as a regulatory agency. Once we start getting into promoting, whether it's promoting electric vehicles, alternative fuels, and all that, you stray from the mission in which the organization was created. I don't think we need to do that at all. While natural gas is an issue, and it's probably one of the issues facing Texas, given the fact that we have some estimates as much as 200 years of natural gas, I do believe that the markets themselves will correct it. While we've got individuals drilling for that natural gas, and it is low, but some of them are starting to say, you know what, maybe the return on investment is not good, so we should stop, and it'll correct itself. I mean, back in the I think it was 1950s, the fact is the Railroad Commission was the dominant agency. They set the price for oil and natural gas. You know, of course, that's been taken over by Saudi sheiks and OPEC, but the fact is the Railroad Commission was that. It is not that now, but we do not need to have regulators promoting anything. We should just allow because now think about it. If we get into the fact that we're promoting stuff, we're actually the DOE and making loans that come up to being nothing, useless, and lose jobs. Or we get into EPA and we're creating regulations to benefit us or benefit our cronies so they can do that. That's not what we're in the business to do. Natural gas and its reason why it is a problem will correct itself from the market.
Now, the question again is, what is the biggest problem facing us?
What is the #1 energy issue facing Texas in both the short and long term?
Well, I think the #1 energy issue facing us is that the EPA and Obama and all his cronies are trying to shut us down. I mean, a study launched last May by the EPA to study the effects of hydraulic fracking on groundwater, which they know perfectly well that the effects are nothing, is, in my mind, the first step in a effort to gain the authority from the Railroad Commission and other state agencies to permit every single onshore hydraulic frac. I'm convinced that's where they're heading, and if that were to happen, it will bring these shale plays in now 11 or 12 states to a grinding halt, costing tens of thousands of dollars and either losing or deferring billions of dollars in revenues to the states and mineral interest owners and the industry and the economy in general. So that's my big fear, is that it's going to be difficult to stop them. We have to replace the president, or we have to be, like I've talked to Greg Abbott about, I said, if I win this office, Greg, I said, I want the Railroad Commission to look like the worst personal injury lawyer you ever met in terms of frivolous lawsuits and delay tactics and stays and make it more painful than 3 root canals. And so I am so serious about that. That's the problem. I mean, it is threatening our very survival, and I won't go through the Straits of Hormuz, you know, $400 a barrel oil talk again, but that's what I'm afraid of. We're sitting on it. We haven't got enough of it out yet. If something happens in those places that cost us 5 million barrels a day, we import from OPEC. Of the 20 plus we use, we import 10. 5 is from Mexico and Canada and some other friendlier countries, but 5 is from the OPEC countries. That's a quarter of what we use every single day, and we write them a check for over $1 billion. So if that 5 million barrels went away tomorrow, our economy would come to a grinding halt. So that's my real fear.
Okay, thank you. One more question, and then I thought I'd let you guys have a couple of minutes for closing remarks. How about if we start in the middle again? I'm trying to be random here.
Oh, yes. Please don't fall.
Well, I think I'm going to scratch this last question and ask these. And I'm not sure if we have time for
a lightning round.
Yeah, I'm not sure if everybody has. You're not going to have time for everybody to answer every question. So, how about?
Yeah, Harold, let's have a lightning round. Let's have a
10 seconds.
Okay, I'll give you 10 seconds each.
Yeah, just a few seconds each.
Okay. How much land in Texas is held by the federal government, and how can the commission help transfer it back to local control?
Okay, well, lightning round. Not much. Not much is held by the federal government. We have some parks, but I think, I'm trying to remember the name of that. Not much at all. How we can help transfer it back to the state of Texas? Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, not much at all, and we're fortunate in that regard because we have so much private land that we can explore on. You know, we'd probably buy it back or maybe, you know, try to take it from them.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. There is a tiny amount of federal land in Texas, and you know, compared to the national park systems, and maybe that's another slam on us that they don't like our terrain. But fortunately for us, we have lots of space to drill in.
Thank you. Next question. We the people need more information on what EPA is doing. Where can we go to get a list of these new regulations so that we can pass the information on to others?
You can go to my website, smithermantx.com. I also have an alternative website, which is obamaonempty.com. We've handed out some stickers for you all, obamaonempty.com. We just brought this up. In that website, we will try to highlight all the hypocrisy of Obama on energy policy. It's a work in progress, but you can go to it today.
Well, of course, you can go to the EPA's website, yes.
Yeah, but they lie.
And try your best to get whatever you can from there. On my website, I have articles written on some energy issues concerning those avenues about the EPA, but you can try your best with them.
There are a lot of good trade groups here in Texas, and you can go to their websites. TIPRO, for example, the Texas Oil and Gas Association, the Energy Alliance of Independent Producers, INGA, the American Petroleum Institute. Between those very sophisticated websites, believe me, all the information is there about what the EPA is trying to do to us and the status of it.
I'll mention the Texas Public Policy Foundation has some good information and researched papers on a lot of the energy issues as well.
Why can't we shop for competitive rates in gas like we can electric for our homes?
You know, the legislature created the ability to shop in most of the state for electricity. It's been a very resounding success. You can buy power now cheaper than you could in 2001 and 2002. And I'm proud that while I was the chairman of the PUC, we stuck to the competitive model, the free market model. It would take an act of the legislature to do this. If they would tell us to open it up for competition, as it is in Georgia, for example, then we would put in place the rules to let you do it.
Yes.
You know, I had a great point to make. I just had a Perry moment, I guess.
Next question.
If it comes to me, I'll let you
So
know.
this has to do with the Trans-Canada Pipeline. Please do not make a decision for the Trans-Canada Pipeline before the independent study of Cornell University. Will you pledge to protect our most valuable water supply?
Okay, so
I think that's supposed to be the Keystone Pipeline, I believe.
Yeah.
well, since and it's again common knowledge that I did testify in front of the State Department in favor to create jobs with the Keystone XL pipeline. I do believe when the study is brought back, or any study that allows me to do a significant amount of research, that allows me to actually, whether it be changing position or actually looking at some other benefits, I'd be happy to. Oh, I'm definitely keeping an open mind for that. As a researcher in energy economics, of course, we are always trained to keep our mind open for different research as well as for new ideas that come about.
Go ahead.
The Keystone Pipeline will be built. The southern leg is starting. You know, Obama said that he was facilitating it. He couldn't lie down in front of it and stop the southern leg. We don't need him to say, come here or sick it, to build that pipeline. And, you know, all that is necessary is 100 miles to get around the aquifer there in Nebraska and Missouri. And I really think it was a mistake on a part of the Keystone Pipeline. I mean, you know, you got to be a good neighbor when you do this stuff. And I can't imagine, although the area is just like a spider web of pipelines. But forget that. That's a bad argument. This is a new pipeline. It's got tar sands. They're calling it oil sands. Let me tell you, I've been there. They're tar sands. And so, you know, if I had been running the Keystone Pipeline, I'd have my landmen and my easement buyers down there and say, you know, you hearing any problems? Well, yeah, the red state farmers don't want us to build. Well, what can we do? Well, we can move it over here 100 miles. Now, Obama would have still killed it, but it would have made him look worse to kill it. So that leg will get built. You know, they don't have to redo the entire 1,800 mile study. We're only talking about an extra 100 miles to get around the aquifer. So it's important to protect our water. There's no doubt about it. And if I'd been running that company, I would have spent the extra money, because guess what? The transporter pays the extra cost, that goes to the refiner who pays the extra cost, that bingo, guess who pays for the cost in the end? We do. So, but anyway, it protects our groundwater, although, as I said, there are jillions of pipelines in that area, but that's not a good argument.
Just quickly, there has to always be a balance between getting the pipe built, respecting the landowner, and respecting the natural resources. I'm in favor of the project as well. I've testified in front of the State Department and a very hostile crowd in Austin where they booed me and threw things at me. If you've been to Austin, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But here's why I was in favor of it. It would bring about 700,000 barrels of crude from Canada down to Port Arthur to be refined. So it creates jobs along the way, and it creates jobs down on the Texas Gulf Coast. The type of crude that we are presently refining in Port Arthur is primarily Venezuelan and Caribbean crude. So we could effectively displace that imported crude by crude coming from Canada. I'd rather be doing business with Canadians than Hugo Chavez.
My senior moment went away 2 questions ago about opening up gasoline to a free market. Do you know we haven't built any refineries in this country in over 30 years because no one can get a permit to do so, and at the same time we have dismantled and taken out of service dozens of refineries. There's virtually no refineries left in New Jersey, and they're taking the 2 or 3 that are up there right now are going to be dismantled within the next couple of years. So that is a bottleneck that we need to solve, and certainly would have an effect on the price of gasoline, I can promise you. It's always nice to remember those things, you know, when you've forgotten.
Okay, I think we're out of time. I'm sorry, but there's a bunch of questions here, but I'm afraid I can't get to all these. Hopefully you can speak with these gentlemen aside. If you've got a question, maybe they can answer it offline. Thank you for coming. Thank you for everything you guys are about and things you've worked on. We'd like to give you 2 minutes each to kind of have some closing remarks, and I think we'll start in the middle of it.
Well, again, my name is Greg Parker, County Commissioner in Comal County. As I mentioned before, a little bit about me. I'm the middle of 3 children. My mom is a single mom, diehard Democrat, unfortunately. But I'm changing her. I'm bringing her over. Slowly but surely. And she said she's voting for me. So I got her over at least at once. I mentioned before, as you see on your cards, completing a PhD in Public Policy Administration. The dissertation research is actually on oil and gas exploration, its correlation to economic growth. Courses from MIT in Energy Economics, Public Economics, member of the International Association and their U.S. Association of Energy Economics. I mentioned that I've authored a book on the myth of global warming, as well as several articles on energy issues, as well as against Agenda 21 and against several other things. You know, I'm running for the Texas Railroad Commission because I believe, again, that we need not only someone not that will just release statements about the EPA, but actually go toe-to-toe with these liberals. I mentioned before that I debated Willie Brown. I went at him, as well as protecting private property rights and making sure that we bring new technology to the Railroad Commission. Again, I give credit where credit is due. I thank Mr. Schmidlman for doing that after I brought that up. But thank you very, very much for... You know, there's going to be a lot of things said and a lot of things done. And you know, I will say this. I'm killing my 2 minutes. It's the first time I've actually seen Barry laugh. So I want to say it's a good thing. You know, the fact is, for me, having the people's endorsement out of Tarrant County, winning that straw poll by 63%. That's the largest Republican voting bloc in the state. Winning that straw poll by 63% really was a feather, and I think it's important to have the people's endorsement and not just a bunch of state lawmakers and things to that effect. Thank you very much for having me, and I greatly appreciate it.
Well, as you probably know by now, my name's Roland Golden Sledge. I'm a sixth-generation Texan, a socially and fiscally conservative oil and gas lawyer with over 35 years of experience. It's the only thing I've done in my legal career is oil and gas, day in, day out. I've been involved in making the decision to drill them and plug them and everything in between. I've been making those decisions for nearly 30 years, decisions that have resulted in drilling hundreds of wells at a cost of somewhere south of about $1 billion. I know what it takes to make tough decisions that have serious financial consequences, and I think it's imperative that we have at least one commissioner on the commission that's been there, done that, that comes from the industry, that has that reservoir of knowledge. And like I like to say, you know, I probably have a decent idea of what the answer to the question is, or at least the ballpark it belongs in, or at least the discipline to go ask the answer of. But more importantly, after fielding hard balls, ground balls at third base for 35 years, coming from all directions, I know the questions to ask, which are oftentimes more important than the answers. And I have an idea, you know, how much time do I have? Do I have a minute?
10 seconds.
Yep. Well, I can't do it in 10 seconds.
Well, I'm Barry Smitherman, and I'm the chairman of the Railroad Commission. I was appointed last year, and now I'm running to keep my job. I was appointed because I was the former chairman of the Public Utility Commission and a former prosecutor. Last session, the Railroad Commission was attempting to go through sunset review, and they did so poorly that at one point the lawmakers were just going to shut them down. And we're going to transfer some of their responsibilities to the PUC, because it was noted that the PUC was so effectively run that it was deserving of more responsibility. That's the agency that I was the chairman of. My three goals are reforming the Railroad Commission and making it more accountable, transparent, and responsible. 2, producing as much domestic oil and gas and coal as we can, leading us to energy independence, and fighting the Obama EPA at every turn. I can't tell you how many times that I've talked about this, how many times I've testified, how many times I've sued him. I've done everything except punch Barack Obama in the nose on the EPA. But I am breathing and living every day to defeat this organization. The only thing that can stop us from attaining American energy independence is a second term of Barack Obama. We have to stop that from happening. I'm endorsed by 2/3 of the Republicans in the House, 2/3 of the senators, 2/3 of the SREC members, all of your East Texas representatives, Greg Abbott, and every pro-life and pro-gun, pro-property rights state in this group in this state. I ask for your support. Vote for me on May the 29th.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. That was really great. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, and thank you, Harold. For all of you who've had questions about horizontal drilling and about fracking, Harold is going to come back pretty soon and do a presentation for us on that so that you all can understand it better. It's very, very fascinating. So Harold will be back. Thank you, Harold.